Alright everybody, last and final lesson on the elements of the art. And it's one of my favorite elements, and that's texture. Because once you learn how to use texture, it completely changes your art. It changes it from when you draw a circle, just a simple shape, into a rounded, real looking object. But you gotta fool the viewer. So you're drawing on a flat piece of paper to create a texture. And a texture means simply is how the surface of something feels. Is it smooth? Is it bumpy? Is it spiked? In real life, there's all kinds of textures. You probably see that. That's bumpy right there. You feel it feels rough. Down this end, it's nice and smooth. So this has two textures, bumpy and smooth. You'll find all kinds of textures. And if you can draw them, it totally improves your work. So, this rock, it's not flat. It's kind of hard to see right there. Maybe you can see a little better here. You can even see the shadows on it. You can see the texture on the surface is rough, but you have to draw it so it doesn't look like a square. It looks like it has texture. This is plastic. It's a duck decoy. You can see the bumps on it, but it's hard. But it's rough at the same time, so it has two textures. But it looks like a realistic duck, sort of. Floating on the water, it looks a little better. And here's my friend Widgie. So this is a real duck, real dead duck. This is a widgeon. You can see the colors on the widgeon. You can see he has feathers. They're nice and soft. They're smooth. They're not rough. You can see the tail feathers. So you have to draw those to create texture in your flat work. So now let's see what you can do with that. If I can get away with moving this without wrecking all the camera stuff. We're down to the last elements of art, or parts of art. Probably making you sick bouncing around like that. So, through all this, through all the parts, we've studied line, we've studied shape. This is what I want all my students to remember. We've studied color, and now we're looking at texture. So I can put a check mark in all those. We got the shape, we got the color, now we're doing texture. So texture can be all kinds of different things. Texture can be pointed or spiky like a cactus. Texture could be long and maybe wavy like a soft hair. Texture can be like grass or sand. Maybe the edge of a saw would be pointed like that. It could be slimy or it could be smooth. See, this gets hard. It's one of the hardest things to do. But when, like I said, when you do, It completely changes your art. So how do we do that? Look at the photograph of this lion, or tiger, excuse me. You can see, if you look at it up close, you can see the texture around there. It kind of looks like a painting, but it actually is a photograph. But you can see the texture. It looks like it has some hair down there. Looks a little fuzzy. So how do I change a flat piece of paper into looking like it has texture? You add the lines, the extra lines to it, certain directions. You can look at the texture on the real object and see what it looks like. Now there's a couple different ways to do that. You can just draw it like this. And if you want to get all French-like, it's called trompe l'oeil, which means fool the eye. So this looks three-dimensional. It looks like it has the furred texture on it. Now, is an apple smooth or is an apple rough? Is an apple bumpy or is an apple soft? What about this? This is what I had for lunch. It's kind of gross. A fuzzy apple. But instead of drawing just a shape, when you saw that, you thought it looked fuzzy. So all I need to do now is add my texture. So there's one way you can do that, is just by drawing it. Another way, which you don't have to do, I'm just going to do this real quick, is by finding textures. I went out and I walked around outside and I saw textures and I thought, well, a paper towel kind of reminded me of a cloud. I did the concrete out in front of my house, made it look like a stone. I just rubbed the crayon on the texture of the wall on the outside of where I live because it looked like water to me. This is a lot more detailed than real life, but you can see the wood texture on this. I did that for my porch. The sun is the texture at the bottom of a food can. This is sandpaper right here, so I'll show you that. A little bit more of that. So I'm going to add one more thing to this. And actually I'm not going to do the sand, but the sandpaper. Is it smooth or is it rough? It's rough. So I'm going to use a green crayon. And it's not rough enough, really. If you get really rough sandpaper, it really shows up good. I'm doing the top of the tree. Now you don't need to worry about coloring in line or staying in lines, obviously, because yeah, see there it shows up. Because you're just going to end up cutting this out. We make a broccoli tree. Do you guys remember broccoli trees? Just for the sake of time. So there's two kinds of textures. Do you remember what they are? There's real texture, that you actually feel, and then there's implied texture, where you make it look like there's a texture in your drawing. A little bit of glue. You remember how to use a glue stick? I teach you this every time we use it. Still, you don't use it right every time. We'll get it down. I got 2 more years to try the kindergartners. 1 more year to get the first graders doing it right. So there's my tree. Each one of these was a different texture cut out and glued down to make a texture drawing. Now there'll be a series of videos after this. One's black and white with a lot of really cool textures. One is a landscape with a house with simple textures. And the other is just for fun. It's textured monsters. So check those out. Do them if you feel like doing whichever one you feel like trying. The textures monster one's pretty neat. And I will see you guys next week.